Ladies and gentlemen, if we could take our seats. Folks, if we could all take our seats. If everyone's ready, I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Having been informed by the town clerk that we have a quorum, I call the second night of our 2023 annual town meeting to order. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for staying for a late night last night. A few items on your clickers. So, we found a few things out. One, we did a complete reset of all the devices yesterday, thanks to Mr. Mallett. These things communicate via something called a channel. It's basically a radio frequency. Hate to say it, but yesterday, one of you out there was playing with buttons, and you changed the frequency of your clicker. So the word to the wise is, if you do that, then we won't know you're not communicating, and we won't get your vote. So if you could do a couple things. We talked to the company that sells this stuff. They recommended please keep them in the sleeves. Second, don't turn them around. We found breadcrumbs in some of the lanyards last night. And if you would, just stick to buttons 1, 2, 3. So we are a professional legal body here tonight. This is like putting jokes on your 1040 to the IRS. I mean, they just don't take it well. So if we could just stick with 1, 2, 3, keep it inside the little lanyard. Please do turn it in. We did have one guilty party walk out the door last night. They returned this morning, head held low, and turned it back in. So thank you to the honest citizen. So with that, by the way, we also retested every device. There were 2 that needed new batteries. Those were replaced. There was 1 defective device. You may have seen Mr. Fundling wandering around. He wasn't lost down here. He had a defective device, so we replaced that. So we think we have a good system here to go. And we're also going to have another receiver on order to increase the reception and range to make sure we don't have any problems as we carry on. So that's it with electronic voting. The second item is I was informed by town council 2 things. One is today, the Secretary of State did approve our bylaw change that incorporated electronic voting. Now that's somewhat moot because we did suspend the rules. We implemented an electronic voting and a whole process that'll last throughout this town meeting until we dissolve town meeting, whenever that is. So nothing has changed in the way we'll go vote, display names, and a voice vote roll call if that's what you'd like to do. But there's also, he reviewed with the Secretary of State Article 12 last night and found one wording change that the AG's office recommended. So what I'd like to do is, we are within an hour of when we concluded that, so it only takes a majority vote to reconsider. So what I'd like to do is entertain, I'll explain the process, entertain a motion to reconsider, get a second, vote on it, and then we'll present the amended language that the town council discussed with the Attorney General's office. It's a small change. You can vote on that. If you amend the language, then we'll re-vote on 12. So reconsider, amend, and then vote. Is there a second? All in favor of the, let's take a vote because it's official. Can you put up, ma'am, Mrs. Karen, could you put up the software, please? All right, we can all vote on the motion to reconsider Article 12. This only requires a majority vote. Thank you. Ma'am, I already closed the vote on this. We can get to the other items in a moment, but...
No, it's about this item. Isn't the warrant committee supposed to give us their viewpoint on reopening?
I think on a simple thing like a motion to reconsider, Since that's not the motion on the floor, their motion is the recommendation, I decided to suspend with the warrant
And
committee's
it's the
opinion.
Attorney General's office, not the Secretary of State.
Okay. I may have slipped the Sec State in there. I meant Attorney General. Thank you. I declare a majority vote with 192 in favor and 19 opposed. So we are now open to reconsider Article 12. I'd like to recognize Town Council Kevin Freitag to explain the language, and we'll put the amended language up on the screen so you can see it.
Good evening, Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. The change that the Attorney General's office recommended was that instead of the language in the voted recommendation last night that said draft of the Town of Milton, Massachusetts dated January 2023, that we identify it as how it's identified now on the town's website, which is recodified general bylaws, and include after that final draft, just to indicate that that is in fact the final draft of the recodified general bylaws. I think we have a version of that to show the meeting.
Yes, we can. Karen, there's a little plus sign down on the bottom right. You can do that too. Just click that plus sign a few times. Is that good? So what we're doing is we're just replacing the name of the document with the name that the Attorney General and Town Council worked out. This would just be a majority vote. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion to amend this language? Yes, Mr. Mullen?
Peter Mullen, Precinct 2. As I understand it, the proposed amendment is to use the January date. It seems like that's changing the name of the document. As I understood it, there was a January draft of this proposed codification of the general bylaws that included items that were not included in the February draft. Maybe that's not correct, I'm not sure. But I didn't understand this was what the document is now called. And I wonder if we can have clarification. That may only apply to the planning board article, I'm not sure.
So do you have a question on 12 then, sir, or just on 13?
I guess I'd just ask for an explanation as to what the January draft is.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Freitag.
The January draft, as my understanding, was a document that was sort of identified by general code during the process, but and was therefore used in the way that the article was drafted. But after the article was drafted, the document that it delivered to the town was in February of 2023. Regardless of any of that, the way that the document is now identified on our town's website, is recodified general bylaws. So the purpose of the language here is just to indicate exactly what it is the town meeting is voting on, which is the document that is on the town's website right now and is identified as recodified general bylaws.
Thank you. Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. And the last thing I wanted to do tonight was to rise to this article because it was obvious last night from the research that was done by other fellow town meeting members that the article, the way we were voting it, was completely incorrect. So I went to the town clerk's office today and greatly appreciate the town clerk's providing the document itself. And the name on the document is Final Draft, and it is dated, to answer the question previously, the final draft was issued in February of 2023. So last night's article or discussion, the term being used was when you go to the town website, you know how you see a block and there's, you hit that to get into the document. So the wording that said recodified general bylaws isn't actually the document on file. I mean, we can go ahead and pass it this way, but the name of the document itself, that is, the wording right there says, all set forth in the document on file in the office of the town clerk, is not entitled recodified general bylaws. It's only titled Final Draft, and it's February of 2023. So, I mean, having gone through over an hour of looking at all these documents, I want to share, because we all, as I said, take the oath of office to abide by the law. So if you want to pass it, not perfectly correct, because it then says has posted on the town website, but the recodified general bylaws part is just a button that you can find on the website. And I think it is important to have the date, because we were using, last night we approved an old, the original draft, not the final draft. But for some reason, they don't want to put the date, which doesn't really make sense if we're referring to an article. The other information with the many issues that were brought up last night, looking through the document, I did not read 338 pages, but it was all approved. In fact, the clerk gave me copies. Every amendment through October 25th of 2021 is labeled in the document. So this is awesome. Instead of calling me to find out of the old-fashioned book what bylaws apply, everyone can go to the website, and once this is fully processed, this is just the document. What they're gonna do is have the actual electronic version. You can put a word in, like you can put zoning bylaws, and you can all pull up whatever bylaw you wanna review. So this is awesome. We can pass it this way. It's not fully accurate, and it should have the date, but if nobody else cares, then I'm not gonna make the motion.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized.
Alexander Whiteside, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. It was my understanding that when you have a warrant article that references a document and you put it in the warrant, it's because you're advising town meeting members of what they should look at, the document they should look at. And there was a document described in the article, which didn't exist. And now that we've passed the article, they want to put the name of a document into the article that does exist. And that's not the way this is supposed to happen. You're supposed to identify the document with particularity in the warrant article so that the town meeting knows what's being discussed. And here they didn't do that. They identified a document that didn't exist. And I mean, I don't know what the consequences should be, but there should be some consequences. This sort of thing shouldn't happen.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak to this motion to amend? Seeing none, ma'am, could we put up the software, and we'll hold on the poll, Mr. Mallett, until the software's up? This is a majority vote. All those in favor, please signify by voting yes. All opposed, vote no. All abstaining, please vote abstain on the motion to amend. And we'll put up the numbers. So the motion carries 206 to 16. Thank you. Now we'll vote on Article 12 as amended. If we could put that back up on the screen so the members can see it real briefly, ma'am. We'll hold off on the vote, Mr. Mallett. So just so everyone knows, now we're voting on the actual article with the green text as you see it here. No one wishes to speak to this article? Thank you. If we could put the voting software on the screen. And this is still a majority vote. All those in favor of the article, please signify by saying yes. Opposed, no. Abstain, please press abstain. And the article as amended, the recommendation carries with a vote of 211 to 9. Thank you very much. We'll proceed on to Article 13. recommended that the town vote to renumber and recaption the zoning bylaws of the town by A, assigning chapter number 275 to the zoning bylaws, numbering each section of the bylaw accordingly, C, inserting in section titles where necessary, and D, updating internal references to reflect the new numbering system, all as set forth in the document on file in the office of the town clerk entitled Draft of the Town of Milton, Massachusetts, dated January 23, prepared by General Code LLC. Now, I know we're going to have a few changes to this one as well. We're going to entertain a motion from, I think, the planning board has some language they'd like to insert. We're going to entertain a motion to amend with the same document naming. But what I think I'd like to do is see, Madam Clerk, do you wish to have any introductory comments? Or are you all good? Sure. Okay.
Good evening, we're back again. So for Article 13, I'd first like to recommend a friendly amendment, which would, again, replace the language draft of the Town of Milton, Massachusetts, dated January 2023, and replace it with recodified zoning bylaws dash final draft as posted on the town's website. There is also a motion, oops.
But hang on, Ms. Galvin, we'll pull up 13. So does this reflect your request for the friendly amendment?
Yes. It does.
This actually has two changes in it at the moment.
So, I would also ask that we add at the end that the town clerk shall be empowered to correct inconsistencies in internal references to the, it should say zoning bylaws that arise from the new numbering system.
Karen, could you replace that word? Ma'am, this is a substantive enough change. I think I'd rather have, it's a little too complex to be a friendly. I think I'd rather just have the body just take a vote on it.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so let's wait till that language is up.
Probably should have separated them. Perfect.
Now, does this represent your intent, Ms. Galvin? Yes, it does.
Yes.
Very good. Was there a second to this motion? Second. Thank you. Ms. Galvin, any explanation you'd like to make to this?
So to be consistent with the...
If you could stand close to the mic.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So to be consistent with Article 12, we're updating the draft to be recodified zoning bylaws. And also consistent with Article 12, we're empowering the town clerk to make any inconsistencies. And I just want to clarify that any numbering or anything, it will be run by the planning board and the town council before any numbers are even changed. So if any, for those that asked for oversight, That would be the oversight.
Does anyone wish to speak to the motion to amend? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hall, you're recognized.
Good evening. Meredith Hall, Precinct 3, Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Planning Board. In speaking with Town Council about some of the Planning Board's concerns regarding the potential fallout from inconsistencies remaining in the recodified bylaw, Town Council proposed that the Planning Board request the Warrant Committee amend its recommendations to include what is now the following amended language. It also is important to mention that Town Council has also said that there is no danger to existing decisions and permits issued pursuant to the zoning bylaw as a result of this recodification. So the Planning Board, we do support this language as proposed, and we hope that you will pass this evening. And I did, while I'm up here, just want to just thank Rich Bueller, a past Planning Board member, for his 5 years of service on our board, and to welcome our new Planning Board member, Jim Davis, to the board. If we could give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion to amend? Seeing none, this just requires a majority vote. If we could put up the voting software on the screen. And then open the poll. Thank you, Mr. Mallett. All those in favor of the motion to amend, please signify by voting yes. Opposed, no. Abstaining, vote abstain. The motion to amend carries with a vote of 99, well, we'll get to the actual numbers in a minute. I won't say percentages. 228 yeses, 2 noes. So thank you. Now we'll proceed to discussion of the article itself as amended. By the way, when we get to it, it'll be a 2/3 vote. Now, Mr. Chewinski, you're ready to go if the audience is deeply interested in this. Just wondering. Maybe a quick flyby, Mr. Chewinski, if you, yes. You know, when you're a town official, you don't get that many moments in the sun, so you got to take them when you get them, right? So there you go. Off you go, Mr. Chewinski.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Zerwinski. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development. In lieu of the sponsor of the article introducing it, I'm going to run you through real quick. I have some slides. Are they available? All right, thank you. So this is a project that actually started when I was a young assistant town planner, and we're all very excited for it to hopefully reach its conclusion here. So you can move on to the next slide. What I want to do here is really just very quickly and briefly walk through the process that General Code, our consultant, worked through with town officials on this process. And these are all materials that are drawn from the town website that were posted in support of this article. So we talked a little bit about this yesterday. The general bylaws and the zoning bylaws, Article 12 and 13, are kind of linked. So a lot of this shouldn't be new, but this is the process that General Code went through.
Karen, could you just page down one?
Oops, sorry.
You're hitting the zoom there instead of paging down.
This is the process that General Code is used for dozens of municipalities across the Commonwealth and hundreds across the country. It is a time-tested method of word processing and transcription, very trustworthy. We have our utmost confidence in how they did a word-for-word transcription of our existing bylaws. And that's really kind of a through line of this article, is a steadfast commitment on the part of our consultant for a word-for-word transcription of the article, and that has its pluses and minuses as we'll go through. You can move to the next slide. So these are the only changes from our bylaw that we know and love today and the draft that General Code produced. The word town has been capitalized consistently when it refers to the town of Milton. That's a style that we use in all of our documents. Numbers, so consistency in terms of numerals versus spelled out numbers. And then the addition of those section titles that were referred to yesterday. There are 107 section titles in the zoning bylaw. 14 of those sections didn't have titles, and so General Code created titles for those. If you look through the document, they're in brackets. I think out of the 14, there's really only a handful that required any sort of creativity in terms of creating them. There really are very self-explanatory explanations of the section. And then obviously the big change is sort of the movement of some of these sections and the renumbering of them. Article 275 versus Chapter 10 and all of the subsequent downstream numbering changes. You can move to the next slide. So this is a little bit more of an explanation of changes to the text and what the manifestation of them are. It's verbatim. No changes to style or content. Spelling and grammatical mistakes, if they were in our bylaw yesterday, they're in our bylaw today, they'll be there tomorrow. Again, steadfast commitment to a word-for-word, verbatim transcription of our existing bylaw. Those internal references that we're referring to, when you change Chapter 10, Section 3, Subsection 4 to Article 275, Section 4, those changes are made. And there are dozens, if not hundreds of them in the bylaw. But again, this is a professional outfit that does this every day. And we do have trust in their process to make those internal references consistent. You can change the next slide. So the numbering in general, and this is kind of a little more detail on the renumbering system. So articles in this draft, sections in our existing bylaw. The taxonomy of sort of sections in our bylaw now under the General Code draft is article, section, subsection. And then, subsections can get as small as they get. And you see this sort of capital A, parenthetical 1, parenthetical lowercase a, parenthetical, I forget if that's a 1 or a Roman numeral, or you can see up on the screen what this is for all of the different sort of downstream sort of subsections. But again, when we talk about inconsistencies that are still remaining, one of the inconsistencies that may still remain in this bylaw, and again, I'm going to repeat the term, a steadfast commitment to a verbatim, word-for-word transcription of our bylaw. If there is a reference to a paragraph in the bylaw, it remained, or it likely remained. And so in the future, that's something where, if this article passes and the town clerk is empowered to make those ministerial changes, that's the type of change that when we identify it, she'll be empowered to do that. You can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So definitions, histories, and section titles. The first section of the bylaw is definitions. They've been arranged alphabetically. They had been kind of arranged in a different sort of arrangement in our current bylaw, and then capitalized. Definitions are very important. It's how we sort of have a common understanding of terms that we use in the bylaw. We've talked about the history of the amendments. This is actually a really handy thing in the bylaw. If you look through our current bylaw, there are some sections that have a history of which town meeting it was amended, so you can go back to the town report and look at it. Other sections of the bylaw don't have that. So I'm going to say this every slide. Steadfast commitment to a verbatim, word-for-word transcription of our existing bylaw. The existing histories have been carried over. Articles and amendments from 2009 to today, we obviously are very familiar with the history because it very recently happened. Those histories are in our bylaw. There may be histories that we may want to, in the future, go back and add to that to make that a really comprehensive list. But that's going to have to be something for the future. And then, we mentioned the section titles in brackets. 14 out of 107 section titles were inserted by General Code. It's very easy to go in and look and make a judgment as to what those are. You can move to the next slide. The derivation table is going to be a really important tool, and this is not technically included in the bylaw, but when I show you what the website is actually going to look like, this is going to be available to anyone that views the bylaw. The derivation table basically says, Section 1 is definitions in the old bylaw. It's now Article 1 in the new bylaw. So if there's a question as you're looking at something, where is, I know height regulations as, it's not even on this clipped off thing, lots in 2 districts. I want to go to Section C. Well, now you know to go to Section 275-2.3. So this is going to be really handy if you've got an old special permit or if you're familiar with the old bylaw. You're going to be able to use this tool to navigate the new bylaw. You can move to the next slide and then probably actually, oh, there we go. That's good. So this is E-Code 360. This is actually the forward-facing product that General Code produces. If you've looked at the zoning bylaw on like any town, they either use E360 or MuniCode. So this is kind of what it looks like. You'll be able to click on any of these. They'll fold down and you'll see all of the language of the bylaw. If you click those boxes, it's actually a really handy thing. You have the opportunity to print that section, email it to friends and family. There's all sorts of different tools that you can use on this website. And really this is kind of a modern industry expectation, quite frankly, of people that use zoning bylaws. You can move on to the next slide. So there's been some questions about what's next if and when this article is passed.
And Mr. Chewinski, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'll fly through this. We've got an ongoing license with General Code. They maintain E-Code 360. Next town meeting, if we pass new zoning, and that's approved by the Attorney General, the town clerk will ship that off to General Code. They do all the work. They insert that into their system almost instantaneously, and now we've got an updated bylaw, which is really part of the crisis that we're dealing with right now, is the delay in updating our bylaw. The town can pursue additional edits to the bylaw in whatever manner it pleases, whether through the bylaw review committee, the planning board staff, consultants, anybody. Cleaning up that terminology that we talked to relative to internal references, editing section headings, adding those histories. My department has been working on digitizing town reports dating back to the early 20th century. We're actually expecting those back relatively soon. That's going to be a huge improvement to operations inside Town Hall and to folks outside.
In 1 minute.
And then finally, General Code, as part of our contract with them, produced what's called, can you move to the next slide? Editorial and legal analysis. So verbatim transcription of our existing bylaw is what they produced. They also produced effectively a homework assignment, looking through existing state law, other elements of other towns' bylaws, and making suggestions for changes. So simple things like, you say historic commission, you really mean historical commission, you should make that change. Next slide, please. And then other more, quite frankly, serious things where state laws have been repealed, changed, added, and are referenced in our bylaw but have not been updated and corrected. So this is something that we have advice from General Code, who has had professional lawyers look through our zoning bylaw and have provided us with this advice. We have the ability to go through that and make those changes. That's a product that we got from them and could be a really important next step in this process. So hopefully that was on the nosy with time. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
That was literally a perfect 10-minute presentation, so thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion before the recommendation before the floor? Mr. Whiteside? By the way, I am going to go to the warrant committee just because we did modify their main motion just to get their final opinion. We'll do that before the vote. Mr. Whiteside, you're recognized.
Alexander Whiteside, town meeting member, Precinct 9. Sort of in line with what I just said, here we've changed the article, but it's a zoning article, and the article had to be advertised for the planning board hearing. And I have a feeling that we may have some problems with the Attorney General about the way this procedure has progressed. But we'll see what happens. Once again, in the memo that I passed out to a lot of people, I've listed a variety of problems that this article has. It's pretty verbatim, but not entirely verbatim. There are changes that need to be made. Hopefully they will be made. Perhaps they won't be made if it passes. But in any event, I I don't particularly like the article the way it is. It's too bad that it hadn't been fixed before it came to town meeting, because I don't, you know, passing zoning that needs to be changed, needs to be fixed, is not the way the process should work. The zoning, when it comes to town meeting, should be ready to go in final form, not what really amounts to a draft. And I hope that in the future that the zoning comes to town meeting in better shape than this zoning did.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak to this recommendation? Seeing none, I'll go to the chair of the warrant committee. Mr. Humphries, what was the opinion on the final modified language and this recommendation?
It is the recommendation of the warrant committee that the town should vote yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll proceed to the vote. It requires a 2/3 vote since we are changing zoning bylaws. If we could change the screen. All those in favor of Article 13 that requires the 2/3 vote, please signify by pressing yes. Opposed, no. Abstain, please press abstain. I declare a 2/3 vote with a count of 227 yeses, 8 noes, and 2 abstains. By the way, a member pointed out that it might help if we describe that the ratio of the yeses to the noes is what's important in either a majority vote or a 2/3 vote. So if the ratio is greater than 1 to 1, we have a majority. If it's greater than or equal to 2 to 1, then we have a 2/3 vote. So if that helps, so be it. With that, we will proceed to Article 14. Recommended that the town vote to extend for 2 years until November 3rd, 2025, the term of the Town Bylaw Review Committee, and to appropriate the sum of $5,730 for the 12-month period beginning July 1, 2023, and that to meet said appropriation, the sum of $5,730 be raised from the tax levy. Mr. Mullen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Peter Mullen, Town Meeting Member Precinct 2 and Chair of the Bylaw Review Committee. Let me just give you a little bit. This article asks for 2 things: to extend the term of the committee and to make an appropriation for administrative support for the committee. Let me just give you a little bit of background information with regard to the committee. The committee was created by vote of the 2015 annual town meeting, but the committee wasn't actually, no members were appointed until November of 2016. Essentially, the mission that we were given was to review all the town's bylaws, initially most of the town's bylaws and eventually all the town's bylaws, and to propose additions, subtractions, changes, reorganization of the bylaws. We were never given the project of digitizing or recodifying the bylaws. That was always something that was given to the clerk's office. We tried to work with the clerk with regard to that project. We received the original drafts from General Code. We went through those. We gave feedback. There were 3 different versions of the zoning bylaw before that process changed back in 2022. Right now, the Bylaw Review Committee has been spending most of its time on the general bylaws, and there are 25 different general bylaws. There are various stakeholders within the town with regard to those 25 bylaws. We're trying to review them for things that need to be changed. There's a lot of very old material in the general bylaws. I don't know if you know it, but you're prohibited from throwing coal ash in the streets under our bylaws. we're in that process. We're going to go through it. We will have recommendations to town meeting for changes in the general bylaw, and we expect to have those in packages, and I think they'll come up at a number of town meetings. With regard to the zoning bylaw, we don't have any plans to go through that with regard to substantive changes. We think that falls more within the purview of the planning board. We're glad to try and help out if they want some help, but that's not something that we're focused on. With regard to correcting changes in these drafts, I don't know what will go going forward. The versions that General Code we've just adopted in Articles 12 and 13. We'll certainly take a look at those changes with regard to the general bylaws. I don't know that we're going to do that with regard to the zoning bylaw. I think that falls more within the purview of the planning board. With regard to the appropriation that we request, we're requesting $5,730. We've never had any administrative support, and it's very hard to keep track of a bylaw when people are proposing changes in it between the 5 members of our committee and then various stakeholders that we reach out to. You know, there's a bylaw relating to the cemetery. There's a bylaw relating to the Council on Aging. We need to reach out to all these groups, see if they have anything they want to add, delete. You have to keep track of changes. We're very hopeful that having an administrative assistant will be able to do that much more expeditiously. I'd urge a yes vote on this article, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Would anyone like to ask any questions or speak to this article? Yes, sir, you're recognized. Mr. Furs.
Nope. Thank you.
We have the,
Hello?
We got you now.
Thank you, Brian Furs, Precinct 10 Town Meeting Member. Just 2 quick questions. Nominating body for the Town Bylaw Review Committee and current membership?
Yes. The town moderator is the nominating authority. Mr. Mullen, I'll give you the honors.
The members, I'm the chairman of the committee, have been since the beginning. Susan Kiernan and Bridget Beatty is a member. Alex Whiteside is also a member. And Tom Caldwell has recently joined us as a member on the Bylaw Review Committee.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to speak to this recommendation? Seeing none, this just requires a majority vote. If we could put the voting software on the screen. And then open the voting. All those in favor, please signify by pressing yes. No, press no. Abstain, please press abstain. And the article carries with a vote of 224 yes, 11 no, and 1 abstain. Thank you very much. Article 15 was passed by the consent agenda, so we'll proceed to Article 16. This will be the first time this body has taken up matters related to the Community Preservation Act. You'll notice there's 2 articles. We'll address them one at a time. We'll start with Mr. Lavash of the Community Preservation Committee, I believe it's called. Sir, you're recognized.
Thank you.
Karen, could you put up the presentation on the screen? There we go.
Good evening. My name is Rob Levash, town meeting member, Precinct 10, as well as the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. I'm excited to present 2 articles this evening to the body. The first one is Article number 16, which is for the annual appropriation of funding for fiscal year 2024, as well as, for the first time, Article number 17, which will be for the committee's recommendation for project funding, our first round of funding. So just as a reminder, Article 16 and the CPC is budgeted by taxpayers. A 1% surcharge on tax properties is about $750,000 budget, is a part of our budget, and the remaining 25 or 30% of our budget comes from fees collected at the state level, which are fees collected at the Registry of Deeds. And just a reminder, the categories that our committee funds are community housing, historic resources, and open space and recreation. So the way our budget is laid out, the 10% of those three categories is about $104,500, and the remaining budgeted reserve is around $679,700, and there is that 5% of our budget which goes to administration costs. The overall budget for the fiscal year 2024, which is estimated, is just roughly over $1 million, which is $1,045,500. So I'm just going to give you a quick recap of how our Community Preservation Committee is organized. So besides myself, Jenny Russell, who is vice chair of our committee, and Pete Jackson, who's treasurer of our committee, are appointed by the select board. And then the 6 remaining members of our committee come from the local boards and committees of the town. So Linda Weld is a member of the Historical Commission. Tom Callahan is a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. Ted Carroll is the member of the Parks Commissioners. Wendy Garpow is a member of the Conservation Commission. Rich Bueller is a member of the Planning Board for the last year. And Joe Duffy is a member of the Housing Authority. And Kathleen O'Donnell did serve on our committee for the first year of our committee. And she continues to be an advisor to the committee as well. So how did we get here? The work of the committee has lasted almost 23 months. Our kind of first priority, our committee was formed in June of 2021. And our first priority was to create a CPC plan. So that CPC plan served as the foundation to our committee. And it was kind of the bedrock of how our committee would run and the funding for CPC. So our first kind of initial meetings were with the local town boards and committees. And this is really to just find out what goals and opportunities that the local committees wanted to put into the CPC plan. So that was kind of the first summer and fall of 2021. And in spring 2022, the committee completed our first draft of the Community Preservation Plan. In June 2022, we had held a public forum and got input from the community for their input on the opportunities for the CPC plan. And then just last September, we finally completed that Community Preservation Plan, which lasted just about over a year. And in that plan, that also sets out our application process. So the application process was a 2-step application process. The first step is the eligibility application. That's a pretty simple application. The committee did receive 14 eligibility applications. And out of those 14, 11 were asked to move on to the funding application process. 3 were deemed basically that we basically just couldn't fund those applications. So in November of 2022, the committee voted for approval of those eligibility projects to move forward to the funding application. The funding applications were a little bit more detailed. So in those applications, we asked for more detailed budgets by professionals. We asked for letters of town boards and committees for their support, as well as just the overall community support letters as well. And then asking just about scheduling for the project as well. And the funding applicants presented to us just this last February. We had held 3 nights for the funding application presentations, and in February 22nd, our committee voted to recommend all 11 projects. In March, just this last March, myself as well as Pete Jackson came before the Warrant Committee, and we received unanimous support from the Warrant Committee for the CPC project article. And here we are tonight at Springtown meeting asking for your vote and support for this CPC or for the CPC projects that we will be able to hopefully fund as soon as July 2023. So just a recap on our budget for this first round of funding. This is kind of a unique situation because our budget was on 2 years worth of funding, so that you'll see up in on the top there, the fiscal year 2022, we got around $751,000. In fiscal year 2023, we collected a total of just over $1 million. That's because in fiscal year 2022, we weren't eligible for our state match. However, we did get around $300,000 of the state match just in November and December. So our grand total of our budget over the 2 years is a $1.813 million. You take out that 5% of that administrative fees, and we were left with the total available funds of $1.761 million. So just to review quickly the applications, the 11 applications that are before you in this article tonight. The 3 categories, there was one application for the community housing category. That is the Affordable Housing Trust, and that represents about 1/3 of our overall budget at $533,000. There was 3 applications for the historical preservation projects, which include the Forbes House, the Milton Town Lockup, the Spalding Garden Masonry Stabilization Project. That is just at $525,000. And the remaining 7 applications was in the open space and recreational categories. All of these projects are in the recreational categories, in the recreation category, and the total funds for that is around $604,568. So the total CPA requested funding is around $1.663 million. So that leaves us with a surplus of around $100,000 that we will be able to use for fiscal year 2024. So in addition to the funding of Article 16, we'll have around $1.1 million, just over $1.1 million to fund with the next year's funding budget. So just quickly going through some of the projects. The first one is to support the activities of the Milton Affordable Housing Trust to secure the construction of additional affordable housing in Milton. This is just one potential project which is being explored, is at the remaining town farm site. There's many other project goals and opportunities for the Milton Affordable Housing Trust to use this money for. Just one other example is to establish a down payment assistance fund for first-generation homebuyers for Milton, as well as just working for developers in town. So as everyone knows, there's many 40B developments that are happening in this town. This money could be used to increase that affordability percentage in those projects. So that's just some of the opportunities and goals for the Milton Affordable Housing Trust, which they can do with this money. So moving on to the next category, the historic preservation category, the Forbes House Museum. This will help to finance stabilization and building envelope improvements to the historic carriage house, barn, and shed, which you see on your screen here. This is kind of in the back of the property of where the main house is, where they have many events and things for the community. The town lockup building, which is down at the wharf. This is to perform masonry repairs, window replacement, in the existing town lockup building. So you see that on your screen. This is kind of a phase 1 of a phase 2 potential project. Phase 2, I believe, is work on the slate roof. And the third historic preservation project is at Spalding Garden. Anyone who doesn't know where this is off of Fletcher Steel Way, which is off of Highland Avenue. The Milton Garden Club does own this property. And this is to fund specifically masonry repairs at this garden site, and specifically just to repair one of the walls that's here. So just going into the recreation projects, Turner's Pond path improvements. This is to help fund path improvements at the Turner's Ponds to assure all-season accessibility. The Milton Farmers Market site improvement study. So this is also down at Milton's Wharf. This is where the Milton's Farmers Market sets up today. There's many accessibility issues with the site. So this will fund a planning study just to recognize what improvements can be made to improve accessibility at this site. And then Peverly Park playground study. So on the western part of town, just south of Pope's Pond is Peverly Park, which is kind of an open green space. This is to study and design a proposed playground at this location. And then kind of coupled with this project, which was an application that was brought together by the Conservation Commission, was to fund another bridge on the south side of Pope's Pond. For those who know and have walked this trail, you know that you can't circumnavigate the whole pond, and so this bridge will actually allow us to go all the way around the pond if you get this bridge, because there's private property that's kind of on the south side that doesn't allow you to go. You have to kind of turn around and go back. And then Milton American Baseball. So this project will fund fencing improvements at Mary C. Lane Baseball Field to improve safety for field and playground users. And then the last two projects one is for the Milton Pickleball Courts study. This is to fund a study of potential locations to support a dedicated pickleball facility in the town of Milton. And lastly, the Milton Parks Recreation Department. This is to fund a major upgrade to court and field lighting at the Middle Guile Sports Facility to provide cost savings, environmental benefits, and reduced impacts to neighbors. So this will be changing all the metal halide lamps to LED lamps. And as you can see in some of the pictures here, this really will focus all the light down on the fields, and the loss or the abuse of the metal halide lamps will be really upgraded for that. So then just focusing back on the article itself, I'm going to tie all this back around. The counting on this is a lot to look at, and I just want to remind everybody that the necessary 10% that we need to fund for all these projects, it's pretty simple when you look at it, because the three categories that we have for this first round of funding is really divided up by thirds. So we easily meet that requirement of 10%, but the way our funds are set up, we need to tap those funds that are already allocated, and then we are using that budgeted reserve for the rest of the categories. So in closing, we're excited by doing this work. This is 23 months of a lot of work that the committee put in. As well, I just want to thank the local town committee and boards as well. There was a lot of work that went into this, and we're looking forward to funding this as soon as July and getting some of these signs up that you can see that our CPA funds are actually at work preserving and enhancing our community. Thank you, and I will take any questions.
By the way, you may have noticed that presentation was longer than usual, but Mr. Levash and I discussed in advance and thought if you saw 16 and 17 together holistically, this being the first time, it might make more sense. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Have any questions for the chair? Yes, sir.
So, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Tom Callahan, Precinct 4. I rise in support of these articles, but I rise for, this feels like a moment. And first of all, I want to extend thank you to Rob, who chaired this. It's not easy when the town adopts CPA and has to figure out how to go about doing the plan, inviting applications from all of you, and scoring those applications. And Rob led the committee seamlessly and flawlessly, and deserves a lot of credit for steering us in the right direction. So thank you, Rob. Thank you, Kevin. I also want to point out that the Community Preservation Act was signed into law by Governor Cellucci in the year 2000. And it gave local communities in Massachusetts an opportunity to pass this surcharge for these three purposes, as Rob has laid out. 194 communities, as I stand here today, 2 are voting today, so it could be 196 in a few hours, but 194 communities, including Milton, have now adopted it. It did take us a while, and as some of you know, in 2012, it was on the ballot. John Cronin and Katie Conlon led that campaign. Unfortunately, the voters did not agree that year. I think it was part education, and in part in 2020, we ran a better campaign and convinced more of the voters, actually 63% of the town's voters, in a high turnout presidential election year. So it was a big turnout, a lot of votes. And I just want to thank Mike Zulis for having the vision on the select board to lead us to put this on the ballot. And our co-chairs, Carolyn Cahill and Joe Reardon, who led the campaign to pass this and convinced our fellow citizens to vote for it, as well as Christine Hodlin, who was the treasurer of that campaign. So there's lots of other folks, many dozens or hundreds of folks that involved, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to read all of your names, but thank you voters, and I urge passage of these 2 articles.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Any other questions for Mr. Levash on number 16 at this point? By the way, I will just quickly read it into the record. Recommended that the town vote to appropriate Community Preservation Act funds as printed on page 30 in your warrant. Anyone else wish to speak to Article 16? Not the individual items in 17, but 16. Seeing none, we can thank you, Mr. Levash. Will you be up here for 17, or are you all good at this point? So, okay, thanks. Very good. If we could, got the screen up, great. If we could open the vote. We'll be voting a majority vote on Article 16. You can open it, Rob? Yep. All those in favor, please press 1. Opposed, 2. Abstain, 3. And the recommendation carries with a vote of 234 yes, 6 no, and 0 abstain. So, ladies and gentlemen, just one point. We do have a tradition in Milton of being judicious with our applause. For example, we typically applaud longtime service members. We applaud exceptional work. However, as we start to get into contentious articles, which are going to come out through the rest of the evening, you might be considerate to avoid competing applauses one way or another for speakers or votes, just in the interest of general courtesy and consideration for the feelings of your fellow town meeting members. So just a request. With that, yeah. You I like. So. Article 17. Recommended that the town vote to approve the projects and amounts shown in the following tabulation under the heading CPA project funding recommendations. All projects must enter into a grant agreement with the town and submit regular progress and budget reports, and each project shall be a separate appropriation. With a total funding of $1,663,013, recommended breakdown Community housing, $533,000. Historic preservation, $525,445. Open space and recreation, $604,568. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? It just requires a majority vote. If we could put up the screen with voting software. And Mr. Mallett, we can open the vote. All those in favor, please press 1. Opposed, please press 2. And abstaining, please press 3. And the recommendation carries with a vote of 235 yes, 2 no, and 1 abstain. Very good. Now, Article 18 was passed by consent. By the way, I think you passed 30 articles last night, so you were here for 3.5 hours, but it was time well spent. So Article 18 was passed by consent, Article 19 by consent, Article 20 by consent, Article 21 by consent, which takes us to Article 22, which is on page 38 of your warrant. Recommended that the sum of $626,278 be appropriated for the purposes set forth in this article, that to meet said appropriation, the treasurer be authorized to issue, with the approval of the select board, bonds or secured notes, the amounts of $626,278 pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 7 of the General Laws as amended, or any other enabling authority, and that the town vote to accept grants under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 90, in the amount of $626,278. That said, reimbursements from the state 100% to be restored upon their receipt by the town treasurer. This is submitted by the select board. It will require a 2/3 vote. Does anyone wish to speak to this article? Seeing none, if we could put up the voting software on the screen. Sorry, missed someone? If we'll pause, thanks. Thank you for letting me know I missed you. Can we turn the mic on down here?
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Lori Stillman, Precinct 2. The reason why I'm here is because having to do with the Water Authority, and I wanted to just share an experience I had when I moved to Milton over 30 years ago. Because I'm in public health, I knew with my 2 young children that it was a wise idea to test our water to see if there were any high lead levels in the water. And sure enough, we found out that there were high lead levels, and we put in a filtration system to make sure that our kids were protected, because high lead levels could have very damaging effects to the development of children. So I would like to ask if anybody here in the town can tell us whether the town in any way monitors the lead pipes that come to our homes. In fact, the lead levels had to do with the pipe that was going from our home to the main street. And I know that a number of towns do indeed monitor where there is lead pipes and either make priority plans to replace them, or to at least inform the residents about the possibility of lead poisoning in their homes. So my question is the DPW or anybody in the Milton Water Resource Authority doing anything to check on the potential lead levels in our homes? Thank you.
By the way, ma'am, just so everyone's aware, when we're talking about Article 22 and the ways, we're really talking about the roads in town. But we passed by consent agenda on 23, which is about the water systems. You didn't have a chance to answer a question, so perhaps I'll recognize Mr. Zulus and we'll just answer your question in the interest of
Thank you,
completeness.
especially since the pipes did fall under the roads. So
Trying to make that connection there, huh? Okay, all right, we'll go with
Thank
that.
you.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member and Chair of the Select Board. So two things. We are required to do testing, and we do testing, and we may want Mr. Berkeley to lay out exactly what that testing is, but we do testing as is required. And then I would also point out that in December we passed about $300,000 for lead pipe replacement in the town, and maybe Mr. Berkeley can give us an update on that as well.
Mr. Berkeley, you're recognized.
Okay, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Can we get the second mic on, Steve? You might check the switch. Is it switch off?
How's that? All right.
Go.
I won't applaud. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Chase Berkeley, DPW Director. So the Town of Milton is a member of the Mass Water Resource Authority water distribution system, and the governing law is at a federal level, so there's what they call the lead and copper rule, and it requires both the MWA and Milton, being a subsequent community, to do annual testing for lead and copper. So we take 20 samples per year and check the lead levels. Milton has been in compliance this current year and for the past many, so we fall within the parameters set out. So the lead and copper rule was recently revised, and there are new provisions that will kick in 2024. So if you recall, at the last special town meeting, we passed authorization for a $300,000 grant to conduct an inventory, which is required under this new federal law. So we need to identify all lead pipes or unknown pipes in the town and then submit a strategy to replace them. So we are in compliance and working towards eliminating all lead in our water system.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this article? Very good. If we could put up the software on the screen. This requires a 2/3 vote since we are borrowing money. And start the poll, please. All those in favor of Article 2, please signify by pressing 1. Opposed, 2. Abstained, 3. And the recommendation carries with a positive vote of 238 yeses, 1 no, and 0 abstains. Thank you very much. Article 23 was passed by consent. We'll proceed to Article 24 on page 39. Recommended that the sum of $350,000 be appropriated for the purpose of financing the rehabilitation, replacement, or enhancement of the town's stormwater system, including costs incidental and related thereto, that to meet this appropriation, the Treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, is authorized to borrow $350,000 under and pursuant to Chapter 44, Sections 7.1 and 8.15 of the General Laws, as amended, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town, therefore, and that the Select Board be and hereby is authorized to accept and expend, in addition to the foregoing appropriation, one or more grants or gifts from any other public or private or funding source. Submitted by the Select Board. This is a majority vote. Does anyone wish to speak to this recommendation? Yes, sir? Yeah, you have 2/3 vote? Pardon me. Been corrected. 2/3 vote. You are right. Yeah, if we can put up the voting software. And open the poll. All those in favor, please signify by pressing 1. Opposed, 2. Abstained, 3. I declare a 2/3 vote with 235 yeses and 1 no, 0 abstains. After that, Article 25 was passed by consent, as was 26, which takes us to Article 27. Article 27, at the printing of your warrant, as you'll see, had no recommendation at this time. You do now have a green sheet in front of you, because the warrant committee had an opportunity to consider the article after the printing of the warrant. What I'd like to start with is just an explanation by the warrant committee chair for their recommendation, and then we'll proceed to some presentations. So, Mr. Humphreys, you're recognized to explain the recommendation of the Warrant Committee.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you can see in the warrant, at the time of the printing of the warrant committee had no recommendation with regards to the sale of the Kidder Branch property at that time. The reason for that is that the negotiations with regards to that sale were underway. It's a process, purchase and sale agreement was being negotiated. These are the types of things that happen in executive session in the select board. We can all understand why we would not be privy to the final terms until we have them. And so the warrant committee did meet. We have discussed this issue with regards to the sale of the Kidder Branch Library is one that's been before the town for some time. Since, following the printing of the warrant, we did meet and we did come to a recommendation. That is what has been provided to you all in this so-called green sheet, because it's green. I would hope that people have taken the opportunity to read this. This is the warrant committee recommendation with regards to why it was our recommendation to the town that they vote no. You can read it. I'll hit 3 points that sum up the thought behind the no recommendation. It's clear and required of us that the library be sold for the reasons that have been stated in the green sheet with regards to the trust, et cetera, et cetera. It's the position of the warrant committee that if the property must be sold, the town should buy it for these 3 basic reasons, which are further expressed in our opinion. 1, this is a land-starved town. We search for parcels. We are looking for land in our town from time to time. This is property that we own. It's ours. It's our opinion that it should remain so. If the town were to buy the property, we could continue to have a relationship with the Discovery School. Next, there was concern with regards to the low sale value that was expressed in the purchase and sale agreement. As you can see from the comment, it looks like there was an appraised value of $800,000, yet a sales price of $500,000. There was concern there. The third was with regards to future space needs of the town, is that, again, like I said previously, with regards to this being a land-starved town where the town is looking for land, is that there could be potential future space needs for the town, such as we know that there's discussion with regards to MBTA rezoning in that area. There's been discussion of how having a low-income and affordable housing is a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. That property, while now may not be able to be used for much more than a school, in the future, that property that's now being valued at $800,000 that we're looking to sell for $500,000 could be worth significantly more if there was rezoning of that area to allow for multifamily. That was a concern looking down the road as a possible asset that the town could have at this point that they would be unloading. So for those reasons, the warrant committee was making a no recommendation. I would encourage you to take the time to read the full comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humphreys. At this point, I'd like to recognize the chair of the Library Trustees, Ms. Hodlin. By the way, Karen, if you go to view on the top left menu, and look down for full screen mode. Then you can just click your way down. Ms. Hodlin.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christine Hodlin. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 2. I'm on the library board for a long time, and I'm also chair of the Building and Grounds Committee at the library. This is deja vu. For many of you, February 2019, I stood before you with almost this exact same article, except for the town looking to transfer or sell it. It was the library trustees. So I'm sorry for those of you that are that are hearing it again, but I think it's worth repeating to everyone here today. The trustees embarked on a strategic vision for the Kidder building in November of 2014. And we did that for a few reasons. We were finding ourselves dealing with being a landlord. We were negotiating the lease, we were tracking down the rent, we were working with Bill Ritchie to try to help Discovery Schoolhouse keep the building up and supported, and did not think that this was the best interest or the best use of either our directory or the board of the library trustees. So we embarked on a strategic vision, and what we did was we first obtained town council to work with us and consult with us on the will and the deed of the Kidder. We met and did a couple presentations over the time period with and for the select board and for the planning board and our town administrator on the steps that we followed and our timeline and where we were planning to go. We notified Discovery Schoolhouse and let them know that of our intent and what we were doing and that there would be a possibility of a sale in the future. We requested and got a planning board member that actually was brought onto our subcommittee for our use in case we needed to discuss zoning or any other issues that might be the purview of the planning board. And we researched estimates to renovate and operate the Kidder to possibly be used as a branch library. Bill Ritchie did a full evaluation of the building at that time, and in order for us to be able to have a branch library, we would have to renovate it and bring it up to code, ADA compliance. And although the trustees have funds that they could have used to renovate it, we would need operating funds to support the library with personnel. And we are still, then and now, still trying to get a couple more employees for the library in just the main branch. The next slide, please. So we embarked on several years of due diligence, and during that time, we engaged almost every town department in researching potential usages, either for a purchase or a sale. We met with the select board, we met with the parks department, the town administrator, the town planner, the building commissioner. We met with the master plan implementation committee. We met with the school committee. We met with the historical commission. We engaged the facilities department, mostly Bill Ritchie, to conduct a review of the building condition to provide us estimates for either both the short-term support and maintenance of the building and the long-term over the next 5 to 10 years, what it might cost to continue to maintain that building. We held several public forums at the library and invited people in with any ideas or input that they might have for what we could do with the Kidder. And we kept the community apprised during this whole process. We held many Kidder open houses, and I personally and Brian and several other people and the trustees had many tours of that building during this whole process because there were many people that were interested. And I would hope that the warrant committee has had a chance to tour the building and the grounds in their recommendation. We conducted meetings with many of the potential interested groups. At that time, what was the Milton Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition was working to try to find a youth center, and that was another potential that they were looking into. So they came. The Milton School Committee came and looked at it for kindergarten, for administration offices, for a preschool. The Milton Food Pantry at the time were housed at the Methodist Church, and they were running out of space and were having a lot of difficulty with the space they had, and they came in and looked at the building and looked at how they could try to renovate and fix it to use for a food pantry. The Milton Affordable Housing Committee came in. I know Tom Callahan was there at the time, Melinda Collins, and I believe someone from the state affordable group came in, so that in case we would think about moving to an affordable housing, maybe the town could put some of the money towards a developer that might be able to use it for affordable housing. We met with the Community Baptist Church. They, I think, are still currently renting out some of the space at the Discovery for use, and they had a very big interest at one point in purchasing the property. We met with the Milton Access TV, Milton Hospital for commercial and office space. As of today, no department or nobody else has come forward to us to use this building. So after doing that, the trustees voted to sell the building in February 2018. The current use of the Kidder is not fulfilling the terms of Nathaniel Kidder's gift. It's not being used for public library use. The property does not further the library's mission nor our long-term strategic plan. The support and maintenance and oversight of the Kidder divert library resources and town resources. I can't tell you how many times Bill Ritchie has been over to that building and been working on trying to help fix or address issues over there. The Kidder does not fit the needs of any town department or commercial use. The trustees and the director needed to focus all of their resources on the main library and our vision. So after 3 years, we voted to pursue selling the building. Before we came to town meeting, we had notified the Discovery Schoolhouse of this decision. We obtained a market analysis from Coldwell Banker. We hired an appraiser referred by the town planner for a formal appraisal, and we began drafting an RFP for the sale of the building. And we submitted the article to town meeting in February of 2019. That meeting was a very interesting. I was here before you all, and there was a long list of people speaking about the sale of the building. And one of our town meeting members at the time, Kathleen O'Donnell, wherever she is, came forward to tell the town that we weren't legally able to sell the building, that the library did not own the building, the town owned it, and that the town council had not interpreted the will and the deed correctly. So the article was pulled, and town council submitted the will and deed to the state for interpretation. I believe that took about another year before we got all that information back. The state determined that the select board owned the Kidder in the trust for the library, and the current use was out of compliance with the will. All the Kidder maintenance, except for small repairs by Discovery, were taken on by the town. The library used to pay for all of those, and the rental income is now deposited in an account held by the town treasurer and transferred to the library on a regular basis.
Ms. Hodlin, 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So fast forward 4 more years. Here we are today with another article before us. The select board has kept the library trustees up to date on all of the work that they have done. We've met with them several times. The select board has accepted a bid from Discovery Schoolhouse. The trustees voted unanimously in support of this article to sell the building. Per the order of the Kidder will, the proceeds will be held in trust and invested for the benefit of the library. This article is a culmination of years of due diligence by many town boards. It's in the best interest that we vote for this. And I just want to say a couple points about Nathaniel Kidder. His portrait hangs in the library. It's on loan to us from the Mass Horticultural Society for a long-term. They just let us hang it in there. We had it repaired. And he was a big lover of the library. He gave us what is now the Milton Art Center to the town. He bought the land and built the Kidder Library and put that in trust for the library for future use for all of the town here. I think that the article before you today honors the will and the deed and the vision that Nathaniel Kidder had for this town. And we ask your support of this article today. Thank Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair, Mr. Zulis, you're recognized to the Select Board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Select Board. And so, in 2019, Kidder became the obligation of the Select Board. Put this here. Thank you, Kathleen O'Donnell. Mr. Moderator, if you could hold my time for a minute, I have to figure out where my presentation here is on the laptop. I'm not sure. I have to. How do I get out of Rob's presentation?
Mr. Pavlicek, I think you might come to the rescue.
I have Rob Levash's presentation, and that's not going to help me. Oh, there I am, down there. Thank you. Oh, right there. Right there. And, oh, why am I put it on the slideshow?
Yeah, down here, I'll do it.
Okay. And now how do we get it up here?
She
Oh,
takes
you'll
care
do
of
that? Okay,
So you
great.
just need the arrows.
Great. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, all right, start my time now. And so let me start at the end, which is the arrow. Good. We're asking authorization to sell the property to the Discovery Schools House for $500,000. That money will go to the library to be used for library purposes. Just a quick background that Ms. Hodlin referred to. This property was bequeathed by Nathaniel Kidder in his will. It was approved by a Supreme Court decree, and there is now a deed to the town of Milton to be held by the town in perpetuity in trust. We may remember that for a future article in this meeting, for certain purposes, and that is to be used in connection with library purposes or to be sold. Right now, we are leasing the property. It's month to month. We have not signed a lease since 2019 because we received the advice of town council that we would not be in compliance with the deed, the will, or the court decree if we lease the property. So the Discovery Schoolhouse is right now a month-to-month tenant because we are technically out of compliance with those documents if we lease this property. Quick background on the property. It's about a half an acre, Blue Hill Parkway. It is zoned Residence C zoning for a detached one-family dwelling or to be used for religious purposes or education purposes. Again, just quick background, opened for library services in 1929, operated in 1995, the KEDS program, the Kindergarten Enrichment Day Services. Many of you may remember that. That started in 1995. Library services ceased in 1996. The Council on Aging was there. The KED services continued. Council on Aging moved. The KED services continue. And then the library used the building during construction of the new library, and the building has been leased to Discovery Schoolhouse since 2009. Again, Ms. Hodlin went through the trustees' activities when they determined that it was no longer of use to the town as a library. The trustees' conclusions, as Ms. Hodlin pointed out to you, I will mention that in addition to the cost to potentially buy this property, the projected capital costs for this property right now are $270,000. So whoever owns this property, if the town were to own this property, the projected capital costs without making it ADA compliant, this is just for the boiler, this is for handicap entry, this is for the parkway, are $270,000. And that would be an obligation of the town if we continue to own this property. So the Select Board, when we entered the picture in 2019, we agreed after our own work on this that the building did not serve the needs of town departments. As I mentioned, we had the advice of town council that continuing to lease the property to Discovery Schoolhouse was not an option under the deed, the will, and the court decree, and so we began to try to sell the property. We had an appraisal, and this is, we had an appraisal in May 2022 in an effort to try to help us sell the property. We put out an RFP, and the response from Discovery Schoolhouse back in 2020, I believe it was, or 21, was that they wanted to pay us $500,000. We wanted to get more. We thought we could get more money for this building, and so we continued the process, and we got an appraisal to try to get more money for this property. We continued the process. Going back just a minute, for this points out the March 2021. I was close on the date. That was our first RFP. We didn't take any action because we wanted to try to do better. So we got the appraisal from Landvest. We put in an RFP in 2022. We got an offer for Discovery Schoolhouse again for $500,000, and we did have an offer from a developer for $400,000, and we determined that for a number of reasons, the Discovery Schoolhouse proposal was the better and the most advantageous proposal for the town. We've been trying to serve a number of stakeholder interests here. We've been trying to serve the primary, the library. That's our primary obligation under the deed, the will, and the court decree. But we're also trying to make sure that the town doesn't have obligations for capital costs and other expenses if there's no benefit. And if there's no benefit, if there's no use for the property for the town, and we have the obligation for operating and capital expenses, that didn't seem like a good deal for us. So we went forward. The other stakeholder interest we've been trying to serve is the fact that Discovery Schoolhouse, it has been clear for many, many years, it was clear in our town meeting in 2019, is a vital asset in this community. And it's a well-respected and needed asset for a lot of families, a lot of parents, and a lot of children in this community. So to the extent that we could marry our efforts on behalf of the library, on behalf of the town, and on behalf of the Discovery Schoolhouse, that seemed to be a win-win-win, and that was our effort here. So we accepted the proposal of Discovery Schoolhouse, and we entered into a purchase and sale agreement, as Chair Humphreys mentioned, for $500,000. We did include in that purchase and sale, and I won't get into the details of this, but we included a right of first offer and a right of first refusal. So a right of first offer means if they ever want to sell the property, they need to come to us first. A right of first refusal means if someone goes to them to sell the property, they have to come to us and we get a chance to meet the deal. So if they ever want to sell, then we get the first shot at it. Or if anyone ever makes an offer for it, we get the first shot, and that will be included. That's included in the purchase and sale agreement, and that would be included as part of the deal. So the benefits of the sale: money for the library. We don't have the maintenance, operating maintenance, and capital costs of this building, which are under our capital plan, as I mentioned, $270,000. That's projected. That doesn't include ADA compliance, which if we were to use this building, we would have to bring it up to ADA compliance. Some of our designers and architects may have a number in their head for ADA compliance, but it is significant. So we would be relieved of those obligations. It would relieve us of our non-compliance with the will, the deed, and the trust. The Select Board has gone along with this for the last 3 years, knowing that we're out of compliance. I can tell you as one Select Board member, I'm not comfortable with it because we are out of compliance with the deed, the trust, and the court decree. And also the other benefit that I mentioned is the continuity for the Discovery Schoolhouse. Now, we certainly appreciate the thoughtful consideration of the warrant committee here, but when we think about the stakeholder interests that are being served here, money for the library, $500,000, the continuity for the Discovery Schoolhouse, and relieving the town of capital on operating costs, it seems to us there's a significant benefit to moving forward with this sale. On the other hand, if the town were to somehow, and there may be a mechanism for the town buying the property from itself, but if the town were somehow to buy this property for 500 to perhaps 800. Maybe some court would decide we would have to pay the appraised value. So we'd have to pay, instead of receiving, we'd have to pay $800,000. Then on top of that, we would have capital costs of $270,000. So what's that? What's the math on that? $770,000 to over $1 million. And then you layer on top of that the potential for ADA compliance.
Mr. Zulus, about a minute left.
And,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
I'm all set, Mr. Moderator. So all of that cost for a building that no department in town needs and for which there is no set purpose. So we think the benefits of moving forward far outweigh any suggestion that we should move forward. So we ask you to vote yes on this and move forward for the library, move forward for the town, and move forward for the Discovery Schoolhouse. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, Mr. Moderator, that's the right of first offer language and right of first refusal. If you want to learn about that, that's on the town website.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. McKettrick, you're recognized. You can pull it out if it's easier. And maybe flip the switch back up.
Test.
No, I'll hold it.
I know a little bit about it. Someone in my house uses one all the time. You can put it back in there now.
Okay, no, I'll hold it. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Marion McKettrick. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member, but I'm here tonight in my capacity as an attorney. I represent Discovery Schoolhouse. I've been working with Discovery Schoolhouse since about 2019. You've heard the history. I'm not going to repeat it. But we spent considerable time when I first began to work with them just studying the legal situation, the requirements of Nathaniel Kidder's bequest, and questioning, I guess, why the school couldn't continue to just lease, which they had been happily doing for a number of years. And this is a relatively small school. It's parent-run, a very, very highly qualified board, I might say. It's an interesting school, highly diverse. It's the only preschool in Milton that offers reduced tuition. And so it is really representative of its neighborhood and of the community. And I think there's general agreement, so I'm not going to talk about it too much, that the Discovery Schoolhouse is a great school, and we'd all like to see it continue. The warrant committee recognized that in their recommendation because they end up saying, and we would lease it back to Discovery Schoolhouse. Thank you. I appreciate that, but I don't agree with the warrant committee's analysis. So you've heard the description of how we reached the point of having an RFP issued through the public procurement process that the town's required to use, and Discovery Schoolhouse has responded twice to that process. First time was at least 2 years ago. Interest rates were much lower then. So by offering $500,000 again in this RFP process, you have to understand Discovery Schoolhouse is actually going to be spending a lot more, and in the last 2 years, they have built up their financial reserves in a remarkable way, really, for such a small school, and they're currently working with lenders as to how they will manage this process, but they've done a really careful financial analysis. This is a good bet for the town. This building will be well maintained by Discovery Schoolhouse, and I just want to briefly go through all of the benefits that are offered in the proposal that Discovery has given to the town. I'm not sure whether all of you have seen the details. I don't know if any of you have read the RFP, which is on Discovery's website. So first of all, just to respond a bit to what the warrant committee said, because Nathaniel Kidder placed restrictions on this use as a condition on his gift, this isn't town property in the usual sense. And the warrant committee's solution for the town to appropriate its own funds to own the property without restriction is not really logical at this point, since the town has just gone through a process of determining that they do not want the property. Both the library and the select board have just explained that in their presentation. The way to achieve the objectives described by the Warrant Committee is to vote yes on Article 27 and approve this sale. These are the reasons. The land will be sold. The proceeds of $500,000 will go to the Milton Public Library as required by the terms of Nathaniel Kidder's gift. As demonstrated by 3 RFPs issued by the town, the price offered by Kidder represents the best value of this property at this time. This was the best price and the best value proposed, and there were other people interested in the property. The land will continue to be used as intended by Nathaniel Kidder for children's services and programs. One of the things the board of this school did before they prepared their RFP was that they researched the history of the building, and they researched Nathaniel Kidder, and in their RFP, they describe what kind of person he was, what kinds of charitable purposes he gave money for, and really he was devoted to both libraries and to children and to children's programs. And Discovery Schoolhouse really very much represents the type of program that he would have supported if he were alive today. As you've already heard, the town will no longer be responsible for any maintenance costs for this building, and the Consolidated Facilities Department has estimated future capital maintenance needs of more than $250,000. So we're not just talking about having to pay for the building in order to get it out of the trust. We're talking about future maintenance costs, and there's no present use for the building. To take the property out of the restrictions of the gift, the town would have to directly appropriate its value from general revenues, diverting these funds from other uses, and transfer those funds to the public library. The Warrant Committee suggests doing this and then continuing to lease the property to Discovery until the property is needed by the town. But the terms of the sale proposed to this town meeting already accomplish this purpose at no cost to the town, and with a direct benefit provided by the buyer to the library. Because the town, and by the way, the right of first refusal was offered in the RFP proposal, the proposal in response to the RFP, by Discovery School. This was not a request by the town, and I thought it was an ingenious and thoughtful response to the concern of the town, and all the board members are residents in this town, of this issue of what happens if Discovery Schoolhouse closes or if it sells the building. What happens to the property? Then the town loses control, never has a chance to use it for town purposes in the future, or even never has the benefit of future value increase to the building. So they put this right of first refusal in their proposal, and then we had to negotiate the actual language with the town, which did take some time, and it's very detailed language, and it's going to go into the deed. If the school no longer needs the building, because the school has offered this right of first refusal to the town could then decide if it then wants to appropriate funds to own the property. So what the Warrant Committee is talking about will be available in the future should Discovery Schoolhouse decide it should no longer continue in this location, or if it closes. It's a nonprofit. If it closes, the school isn't going to have to profit from any sale. It needs to pay its debts, but it's quite possible the town could benefit even more than from an ordinary sale. So in any case, at that time, the town could decide what it wanted to do, whether it wanted to use the land for town purposes or sell the land and building with the profit going to the town and control of reuse staying with the town. So the goal of the school's proposal is to directly benefit the library now as required, but to offer a future opportunity. Does that mean I'm talking too long? I'm almost done.
It's a good idea, though. So, yeah.
Hello?
There you go.
The sale of the property will satisfy the terms of Nathaniel Kidder's gift by directly benefiting the library. It will end the lease arrangement, which does not.
you want to try a different microphone, ma'am, and maybe we can have someone look at that?
I'm on.
Okay.
The property will not sit vacant, will not be a maintenance burden for the town. This gives the town the best possible combination.
By the way, you've got about 2 minutes or so.
Okay,
There you
I'm
go.
done. I'm closing down here. This gives the town the best possible combination of benefits while fulfilling the requirements of the original Nathaniel Kidder gift and ending the lease arrangement, which does not. And the property won't sit vacant, won't be a maintenance burden for the town. Furthermore, just as an aside, and we just listened to the CPA presentation, I do want to point out that there are other benefits too with allowing the Discovery Schoolhouse to purchase this property. This will allow the preservation and continued and upgraded maintenance of an historic building at no cost to the town. This will also continue a needed as-of-right use that has no negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood, and in fact has very strong support from the surrounding neighborhood, and I know was a consideration in terms of trying to decide the conditions of the RFP for this building. We heard about that in 2019 at town meeting, and if you're undecided, you can hear a lot more about it tonight, but I hope that you already agree with me that it's a great program and it should continue. So for all these reasons, we ask that the town meeting vote to approve the sale of the Kidder Library property to Discovery Schoolhouse, Inc., and to allow the Select Board to complete the conveyance of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I'd like to recognize Ms. O'Donnell and Mr. Walker. Ms. O'Donnell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Kathleen O'Donnell. I'm from Precinct 7, and in my life, besides being a town meeting member, I'm a real estate attorney and past president of something called the Abstract Club. So actually, when I took out my folder for this meeting this week, I found the copy of the deed that I had found in 2019, which is to the town and the inhabitants of the town of Milton. And I am only standing up now to say that the solution proposed by the Warrant Committee cannot happen because the property is already owned by the town. And as you know, most of you, is that you cannot sell property to yourself. And so I would just point that out. The title is in the town, and there's no way to deed your town property back to the town. It's not something that's done in real estate. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Walker, you're recognized.
Leroy Walker, town meeting member, Precinct 10. Good evening, everyone. This is an instance where I think the Warrant Committee has actually done some good work and raised some important points for discussion. Not the least of which is that there might be other potential uses. Although I understand, as Ms. Hodlin said, we've gone through a long process, so too did Mr. Zulis say that. But in an environment where we are consistently making the point that the schools are overcrowded, it might be useful to consider that this property could relieve some of that overcrowding. But I'm gonna move past that quite quickly. The most important point the Warrant Committee raised, I think, is the fact that the property was appraised at a value of $800,000, and we have accepted a bid of $500,000. I've had the pleasure of partnering with Mr. Zulis on negotiation of contracts for the town. I've had the pleasure of partnering with Richard Wells in negotiating agreements. Both of them are superior negotiators. So I have trouble figuring out how we would, under what circumstances, accept a bid that's more than the appraised value. So, my simple solution to that is the only circumstances under which I think it makes sense for us to accept that as a purchase price is that I am proposing a friendly amendment that the purchase and sale agreement include a clause that said in the event that the Discovery Schoolhouse decides to sell the property back to the town, that it agrees to sell it back to the town at the price for which it was purchased. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, do you happen to have that? Could you take a moment and write that down? Because I'd like to make sure the body's aware of that. By the way, up in the booth is Steve here to help us come take a look at these microphones. Thanks.
That one went across. They went to this one more fast. This one died too? 1, 2, 1, 2. Both of them died. They go for a minute and then they One, two, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2. One, two, 1, 2.
Mr. Wells?
By the way, in this pause, if there's any town meeting members that were unable to attend last night during the swearing in and are here tonight for the first time, the town clerk has just texted me to ask you to go over to her desk and she'll swear you in. So if you missed last night, and tonight's your first night, she'll just do a quick swearing in for you.
What's that? I ate them all.
Karen, can you hide the screen and then edit that text in?
Yes.
Can you read it? Can you get Mr. Walker on? Mr. Walker, could you come down? Oh, there you are. And help the Warrant Committee clerk with your language.
guys recommending? You what?
We're not.
I understand all the heavy.
Mr. Zulis, you're recognized. So, ladies and gentlemen, where we are right now is we have a friendly amendment proposed by Mr. Walker, and we're going to ask the opinion of the submitting board, the select board. So we've taken Mr. Walker's text, inserted it, and you can see it up on your screen.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As much as it pains me to report to my friend Mr. Walker, the Select Board does not accept the friendly amendment for the following reasons. The question was why we accepted a $500,000 purchase price when we had an $800,000 appraisal. We've been at this for 3.5 years. We sent it out twice. Library had sent it out once before. We sent it out twice for an RFP. Came back the first time, and the number was $500,000. We got the appraisal to try to get a higher price. That's what our effort was, and it didn't work because we put it out again, and the price we got was $500,000. Now, with respect to the friendly amendment, the Select Board doesn't think it would be a market-based solution here for a buyer because it would not account for any improvements that would be made to a property over the course of 5 or 10 or 20 or 25 years. And so that it's hard to see a buyer accepting that kind of term. If we were to accept this and to try to impose this term, if town meeting went along with this amendment and wanted to impose this term, we would have to go out to bid again. And so this process that has gone on now for nearly 10 years would continue. So the Select Board does not accept the friendly amendment. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Walker, would you like to then propose this as an amendment? I think we may have fixed the mics too, by the way, while you were busy.
Contrary to popular belief, I do not wish to extend the amount of time we're here. So with that explanation, I am withdrawing both my friendly amendment and I'm not going to make a motion to amend.
Thank you, sir. So with that, I think we have a number of speakers. I think Mr. McKettrick may have been first, and then we'll ping pong back and forth. So Mr. McKettrick, you're recognized.
Thank you. We got batteries? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I thought I was retired, but I came out of retirement tonight because this is such an important issue to me. And to
If you could just introduce yourself, sir, and precinct.
Yeah, this is Joe McKettrick,
Thank you.
Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member. I wanted to come at this from a slightly different way. In 2019, when this was being discussed by the town meeting the first time around, the local newspaper, the Milton Times, after the meeting, published an article that was entitled, "What Would Nathaniel Kidder Do?" And we might want to think a little bit more about what Nathaniel Kidder did and what he would do if he was here today. If you look at Hamilton's history of Milton, there's a section on the library, 2 pages, and really about a page and a half of it is Nathaniel Kidder. And according to Hamilton's discussion of what went on, he said that Nathaniel Kidder had owned a house, a home, at the site where the Kidder Library stands today. And he had a number of friends who would gather there and so forth. And because Kidder was so much interested in advancing everybody in the town and Milton itself, he decided to take his building and convert it and devote it to the purpose of what we would call today a recreation or civic center. It wasn't very elaborate. It was a small house, but it was one of his initial efforts to push the idea that there were things that should be done in the town and to protect the interests of the town. So eventually what happened was it became a success. Kidder discovered that a lot of people came. It was sort of a focal point for subsequent activity on the part of Mr. Kidder. And I found out in my research that he was Nathaniel Thayer Kidder. That's what the T stands for, if you had wondered. So what happened was the house that he had was eventually taken down and replaced with the structure that went up in the 1920s that is there today, the brick school house, now schoolhouse. And I think we should think some of this history, and I think that Nathaniel Kidder would tell you, if you were here today, you should do something for this idea of activity in the neighborhood, and you should select activities that are consistent with what's happening in the town around us. Now, I walk past that site 3 or 4 times a week, looking at the Kidder Library when I go back and forth to Mattapan and go to work in town. And I've seen the site, and the school itself is now a hallmark that really should not be destroyed or tampered with. It's a link to our past, a link to Nathaniel Kidder's desire to advance the interests of the town and the people of the town. So I think that the Milton Times had a good question. What would Nathaniel Kidder do? What would he be telling you tonight if he had an opportunity to describe his wish? So we've had a lot of real estate law. I've risked my position by following my wife speaking before a town meeting, but I thought in the interest of advancing some of the true interests of the town that I should go ahead. So think a lot about that, Nathaniel Kidder, a little less about real estate and a little bit more about the soul of Milton and the significance of that building that's here now and that should be preserved. So thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Hello, I'm Christine Turnier, representing Precinct 4 as a brand new town meeting member. Thank you. I'm also here representing Discovery Schoolhouse as a member of its board. And Discovery has been a vital part of Milton for over 30 years. And in that time frame, it has served over 750 children and thousands more through its partnership with the Milton Early Childhood Alliance. And I want to try and make that concrete for you. So what that means is that hundreds of children have been more successful in school because they've had access to high quality, affordable early education, which has helped them have better learning outcomes throughout their entire lives. It means that thousands of kids have walked around Houghton's Pond and enjoyed a story walk with their parents and their brothers and sisters. And it means that thousands of families have enjoyed concerts on the town green that have been sponsored by MICA, the Milton Early Education Alliance. And it just so happens that my daughter Quinn, who is a current Discovery Schoolhouse student, is going to be going to kindergarten next year. And it's like it was timed, I swear it wasn't, came home with this t-shirt. I'm sure you've either put your children in these t-shirts or you have seen them around town. These are t-shirts that are made available to every child in Milton who is going to kindergarten. And it is through the Milton Early Childhood Alliance, which is sponsored by Discovery Schoolhouse. So I wanted to just take a minute to make this real for everybody, the value that Discovery brings to our town. But that's not entirely what's up for debate here. Part of what we're talking about is giving Discovery, and Discovery having a permanent home in Milton. What that means is that the staff that works there and the families that work there know that Discovery is going to be around for a while. It means that staff members know that they're going to have a good employer in town. It means that the families know that they have reliable, affordable early education, and that is not going to go away next month or next year, or if the rent is increased, it will always be there for them when they need it. I do also want to say that this will allow Discovery as a program to really put down roots as well. So that means that we can do things like the mundane, like replace the carpets and improve the bathrooms, but it also means that we could potentially extend programming. We could have an art program or more summer programs. All of these things happen when Discovery has a place to really put down roots. I'm going to end with a fun fact, which is that my very first town meeting was in February 2019, and I came then not as a town meeting member, but as a parent, panicked because I was like, oh gosh, what happens if my school that I rely on goes away? And I remember at the time thinking to myself, like, this shouldn't feel like an either-or situation. There has to be a win for both the library and for Discovery Schoolhouse. And what I'm really happy about is that after 4 years and one pandemic, we have that option. We have a win for the library, we have a win for Discovery, we have a win for our town. And so I hope that you will join me and the select board and the trustees and all of the Discovery families around town by enthusiastically voting to support the purchase of the Kidder Library. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chinman, you recognize, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Michael Chinman, Precinct 2. As recently as April 4th, 2023, the Warrant Committee did not have a recommendation on this article. April 4th was the date of the warrant. And 23 days later, we have this green sheet of paper where the Warrant Committee says, quote, the members of the Warrant Committee propose for consideration an alternative plan. So they've spent weeks on this alternative plan. But these 15 members of the Warrant Committee, not a single person in town voted for them. Not one voter chose those people. And if they wanted to go...
Mr. Chinman, we're all well aware of that. If you could not insult or impugn the Warrant Committee and direct your items to the article under attention. Thank you, Mr. Chinman. You can have a seat.
Are you going to speak to that, Mr. Moderator? Are you going to speak to that?
I thought you just swore at me. Calm down, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me.
Mr. Moderator, I'm an elected member of town meeting. I'm representing Precinct 2. And for a warrant committee member to say that I'm bullshit,
Mr. Chinman, I apologize. I misunderstood what I heard there. I hope you accept my apology for misunderstanding. It's a loud room. If we could proceed calmly, but direct your comments toward the article.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Elections matter. The members of the Select Board are elected by the town. They have responsibilities about town property. The members of the library trustees are elected by the town. They have responsibilities regarding library facilities. They've spent years on this, and they've come up with a plan. And we have the option of saying no to their plan. But if I or you or any member of town meeting proposed an amendment to this article that said we wanted to modify it and change it to an expenditure of $800,000 for the town to buy this property, it would be ruled out of order every which way by the moderator. The 15 members of the warrant committee do not ride herd on town meeting. They do not ride herd on the select board. They do not ride herd on the library trustees. They are advisory citizens only. And I urge town meeting to adopt this article and reject the recommendation of the warrant committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chinman. Okay, back to this side. Ma'am, would you like to go? Are you all teed up? Okay, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Susan Kochbaser. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 4 and a longtime board member of Discovery Schoolhouse. And I just wanted to say a few words more about the organization, Discovery Schoolhouse. I'm sure you've heard years ago and probably some more tonight about the wonderful programming within Discovery Schoolhouse. But I also wanted to call out that Discovery Schoolhouse as an organization is a proven leader in the community. Years ago, when the MICA grant was looking for a lead agency so that the funds could come into our town, Discovery Schoolhouse stepped forward and agreed to take on that work of managing that grant and has continued to do that work so that we can have all of the benefits and services that come to us through that MICA grant. And then more recently, during the pandemic, Discovery Schoolhouse again stepped forward and applied to become a provider for essential workers. I believe, well, actually I could be wrong, so I won't say that, but that it was the only one in town. This was before the vaccines and not without personal risk to the staff at Discovery that felt that it was important to serve and that it was important that essential workers during the pandemic had drop-in child care where they could leave their children safely while they took care of the rest of us during the pandemic. So I strongly urge a yes vote on this. This is an organization that we need in our town that provides vital services and that steps forward when called to serve us. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, ma'am, you're next.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Hart, Precinct 5. I'm usually known in town as folks as Julian's mom. I have also known as Chris Hart's wife. We have 4 boys. I work at Beth Israel in Boston, but tonight I'm wearing the hat as Frankie's mom. My youngest son, Francisco Escobedo Hart, is 5 years old, a thriving kindergartner, and spent his time growing up in Discovery Schoolhouse in the toddler room and the preschool room. It's a warm, wonderful, Montessori-esque program with a beautiful array of diverse kids and staff. In fact, that's why my family, Mexican-American, husband, native Spanish speaker, and I picked Discovery in the first place. Not only does it cater to dual-income households like ours, it welcomes an array of diverse families, all different income levels. And one of the reasons for this is that Discovery is the only preschool and childcare institution in town which accepts childcare vouchers. And why that is important is because Discovery is committed to providing equitable, affordable, inclusive childcare for all families. And if we were paying attention to the wonderful presentation by our fellow town meeting members, Chris Hart and also Pat Lattimore, on behalf of the Equity and Justice for All Committee yesterday, we would recognize this is a call to action. One critical component of building and fostering an equitable and inclusive Milton means our community should offer equitable and affordable childcare options for all its residents. Frankly, we need more Discovery schoolhouses in Milton. But let's start by preserving the one we have and continue to provide at least one accessible, affordable option for our beloved Milton.
Thank you, ma'am. You next, ma'am? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mariah Cullen, Precinct 6. Thank you, town meeting members. I am going to give you a taste of being a parent at Discovery Schoolhouse during the pandemic and what that looked like for somebody like Susan, who mentioned I was an essential worker and times were really scary. Discovery Schoolhouse is a community, is a place that steps up when there is a need in our town. And during the pandemic, there was a need for families like ours who had essential workers. Discovery Schoolhouse offered the only place for children to go to, a safe place, a comfortable place. I'm so eternally grateful that I was able to drop my 2 little ones off there every day when I had to go and work in a hospital during the pandemic. In addition, fast forward a few months later, when it was time to put our children back into kindergarten for families in town that did not necessarily want their little kindergartners to start in a virtual environment, but felt that those early young days in kindergarten, it was important that children have the opportunity to be face-to-face with an educator. Discovery Schoolhouse again stepped up and offered the only in-person kindergarten during the pandemic for our little ones. The kindergarten today remains, it thrives, it's growing, it's very popular, and we hope that it continues for other families in the future. I hope today that you will vote yes to support Article 27 and Discovery Schoolhouse purchasing the Kidder building. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You recognized?
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Hutchinson. I live in Precinct 1. I'm also here in support of Discovery Schoolhouse. And I wanted to also make the argument that for working parents like myself, I'm a nurse midwife at Boston Medical Center.
Just to be clear, you're a citizen, not a town meeting member.
I'm a citizen, yes.
Pre-approved citizen. Just wanted
Yes,
to
I am.
identify that for the members.
Thank you so much. New here. So when we were looking to move to Milton, I actually toured Discovery before we even moved in, because having affordable childcare with hours that actually supports my work in the hospital, which Discovery offers, was essential to our family. And I think it's an economic argument for the town of Milton that having childcare that has extended hours where you can, that it's longer than your sort of half-day typical preschool, but that for parents like myself who have long hours, they've been there for us. So not only is it high quality and loving and wonderful for my kids, but I can actually go to work too. So thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, are you next? You next? As long as no one's on the left, we're going here.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Liz Dillon. I'm from Precinct 6, town meeting member. Thank you so much. I just had a few questions, so I'll say them all sequentially, and then hopefully the correct people can answer them. I am an attorney. However, I'm not an expert in municipal law, and I only got this green piece of paper like the rest of us today. I did read it. I had a chance to read it thoroughly in my seat. I had a question for the town council, if it's possible for you to answer the legality of the warrant committee's alternative proposal. I heard the real estate attorney earlier, who represents Discovery Schoolhouse, earlier say that the town can't sell town property to the town to put in trust for other departments of the town. I'm interested if you can speak to the legality of that. That's my first question. And then my question for the warrant committee is, first of all, if you have any kind of a response to Mr. Zulus, the chair of the select board's comments about the $270,000, which added with the 500, I would imagine would be about the $800,000 that it was appraised at. I don't know if that $270,000 that Mr. Zulus was talking about was a one-time $270,000, or if that included all the carrying costs like insurance of the property, so I'm curious about that as well. And then I'm also interested in where the money is coming from if the town were to purchase the property on behalf of whatever the warrant committee had recommended. I know it was kind of phrased as the town purchasing, but in any event, where would that money come from? I'd imagine it would have to be appropriated, but has there been any plans for where that money would come from? That was for the warrant committee. And then finally, have they run scenarios and estimates in which the value at some point in the future could exceed the additional money that Mr. Zulus had said that it would cost to keep the property, upkeep it, and to make it ADA compliant, and whether that really would be worthwhile for the town? I'm interested. Thank you.
We may have to repeat some of those.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with, because the chair of the warrant committee was outside during, I think, your second question. So we'll just pause, but I got all four, and we'll clarify we got them right. Town council, could you answer the first question on the concept of the town purchasing land from itself?
Thank you. Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. With great respect to my sister, Attorney O'Donnell, I do believe that there is a mechanism by which the town could purchase the property. Because the town owns it in trust, it essentially owns it in a separate sense than it being held out or owned outright by the town as a property owned by the town for general municipal purposes, let's say. So I do think that there's a mechanism. I think it would be an extraordinary sale, though. It would be unlike a typical sale because of the relationship of the parties. But I do think that there's a way that it could be accomplished.
Thank you. And then your other questions were, did the warrant committee, what is their response to the, or did they consider the capital cost of maintaining the building? Maybe I'll keep it, is that about right?
I don't know if it'd be more appropriate to ask a follow-up question first of town council,
Sure.
or wait until the end.
Sure.
In your professional opinion, I guess my question would be, is that legally risky in terms of lawsuits that may occur? You said it would be exceptional. I'm not sure if it's really very straightforward or if it would be problematic. I'm just concerned about the cost to the town, obviously.
Again, Kevin Freitag from the Office of Town Council. I'm really not in a position, I think, to calculate risk associated with that sale. I just think that it would be an unusual sale. Certainly the town would proceed with care and would evaluate whether or not it was possible as it got closer to it and evaluate risk at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I think if I got your three questions for the warrant committee is, did they consider the ongoing capital costs when they made their recommendation? I think that was one. Does that sound right?
If they had a response to that,
If they have a response to it.
$270,000 additional capital costs.
Okay. I'll leave it to
Or whether they considered it, that's fine.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, because, okay, Mr. Humphrey, so the question was, the chair of the select board mentioned ongoing capital costs if the town maintains the building, maintains the ownership of the building. Perhaps, was the warrant committee aware of that, and how do they factor that into some of your thinking?
Right. With regards to ongoing capital costs associated with the building following a purchase, we did not specifically get into that. I think given the nature of what the purchase we were talking about and a property that's assumed, so that would have been germane to our conversation. We get it that yes, there's cost to running buildings, so we didn't have a breakdown in a spreadsheet with regards to that. But I think it's assumed that there would be a cost associated with it.
Thank you. Her second question was, did you consider a source of funds of how the town would purchase the building But I think in your recommendation, you didn't make a recommendation to purchase, but if you could describe your thinking.
Again, we're looking at the warrant, so we all understand that funding for the functions of our government come from various, so there's various sources of funding. It's too bad that we received, this article so late, because we were sitting on something on the order of $4 million in free cash. So one of the things that would have been a possibility to look at this, if we had that earlier, is one possible source of funding could be some of the $4 million in free cash that this town meeting is going to disperse over the next couple nights. So while we didn't get specifically into how exactly it would be purchased, again, it is it was our assumption that it would be done through the processes of town meeting.
And then, ma'am, any follow-up so far, or are we okay so far?
I'm okay so far.
And then on your scenarios, was it scenarios to purchase? Is that what the question you were asking? Perhaps you can clarify.
Yeah, so in the alternative proposal that you had, there was some discussion about purchasing the land. My concern is that if it does take a long time, as it's taken some time already, and I know we had talked about having to go back and rebid when Mr. Walker was having his friendly amendment earlier, have you run scenarios in which you estimate what the likelihood is? So we talked a little bit in your green letter here that I've read about if in fact it became rezoned due to MBTA rules and things like that, that the property value could go up significantly. Have we run estimates to see how much the property would have to go up to cover the $270,000? And again, perhaps it'd be appropriate for me to ask Mr. Azulis if that's $270,000 per year, or if that's a one-time $270,000, and if carrying costs have been factored in as well. But in any event, I'm wondering if calculations have been made in that level of detail to see, is it worth it for the town to continue with this process on the hope that someday it might be monetarily worthwhile?
Mr. Humphreys, that was still for Mr. Humphreys?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Right, so did we run modeling on this? No, we did not, okay? The opinion was based upon what we know so far of what's happening with regards to MBTA rezoning. And it was, it was our assumption that if that property, because there's a lot of discussion with regards to that property and the size of it.
Yes, thank you, Dave. A little closer,
It was
thank you.
our understanding of the size of that property and how small it is and how it is situated, that at such time, and there was a lot of discussion with regards to why the RFPs were so low and why nobody wants to go in there, and they don't want to do anything in it because of the nature of that property, that if it was rezoned to allow for residential redevelopment of that it would be a fair assumption that the fair market value of that property would be greater than it currently is. In the context of them saying, that they've been saying that they were only able to get, the RFPs at $500,000 just because of the special nature of that. So again, we didn't, run out and hire, engineers and consultants to give us, dollar amounts on that, but it's not an unfair assumption, is where we were.
Do you have a follow-up, ma'am?
Well, I was wondering if I could ask my question that I keep alluding to Mr. Zulis about the $270,000, if that's a one-time cost or if there are additional carrying costs.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
But I have no
Humphreys.
follow-up questions for...
By the way, thank you for coming so prepared with all your questions. I appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Well, you said to do that.
Yeah. Mr. Zulis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mike Zulis, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, Chair of the Select Board. So these $270,000 is part of the capital request that was put in by Bill Ritchie of the Consolidated Facilities Department, and it includes, these are one-time capital items. and it includes a new exterior ramp and handicap entrance, parking lot upgrades / draining improvements, and new boiler / hot water. And these were things that Mr. Ritchie saw as basically really basic, required. It doesn't include the annual operating costs, which I think ran around between $6,500 and $14,000. That was the annual, roughly annual costs for smaller items, non-capital items. And then that doesn't include, as I mentioned before, the ADA compliance. And the cost to get ADA compliance, we don't have an estimate on that, but I think it's fair to say that it's significant. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Is that enough?
No, well, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Okay. No,
Not the whole thing,
I'm still here.
everybody. I'm sorry.
Let me relax
okay.
here for a minute.
Do you know, and maybe not, what the additional carrying costs would be? So like insuring the property, having people maintain the property, lawn services for the property, those kinds of additional costs.
Beyond the capital costs and the operating costs, we didn't get into that because there was no town department, there was no use for that property by the town. And so we agreed with the work of the library trustees over many years that the best case here was to sell this property, get a value for the library, not have any additional costs for the town. And you mentioned it could be $800,000 if you put the 270 with the 500. We have an appraisal for 800. So if we had to get the property out of trust, if there were a legal mechanism over several years going to court to do so, that would take it over $1 million, right? Without even considering the ADA component to this. So you're talking about a lot of money.
Right. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I think Ms. Rosenberg, Mr. Vaughn, I think was after you or before you. Mr. Vaughn, you're recognized.
Good evening. Paul Vaughn, Precinct 8, town meeting member. With all the talk that we're having now about Thursday, and it will be about space, and it will be about dollars, would it be possible, anybody that could answer the question, that the Kidder facility be taken over by the school department and used as a source for preschool? That may in turn free up some of the limited space that we have in the other local school properties. Simple question, not an attorney. Give you folks a break. But I'd like to get that answered. Is there another use that the Kidder can better serve the town? Thank you.
By the schools. Perhaps Mr. Zulis, you have a first bite, and then Mr. Pavlicek.
Yeah, I would only say that Mr. Vaughn, we'd have to pay for it in that case. We would have to pay for it in order to use it for that purpose. And then I think Mr. Pavlicek may be able to answer the question about a school purpose for this property.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlicek. You're recognized.
Thank you, Glenn Pavlicek, Assistant Superintendent for Business of the Schools and Town Meeting Member Precinct 10. We have looked at the use of the Kidder Library for a school. There are several considerations. First off, you need to recognize that all of our preschools are special education-based preschools. We have some that are sub-separate preschools where we have up to 8 children in a room with a teacher and 1 educational aide per student. So it's very staff intensive. We also have ones that are integrated preschools where you have a certain number of usually 7 or so students with special needs and 8 with students without special needs because they have to have more peers than there are students. In those rooms you have teachers and some number of aides depending on the number of students in there and their needs. I mention that just to emphasize that these are very labor-intensive preschools. Also, you have physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, nurses, team chairs. It goes on in terms of specialists who need to service them. So we need to have those services co-located for efficiency of all the staff, which is why they exist currently primarily in one location at the Collycott School. Going back to the Kidder for a moment, While a private preschool can inhabit the Kidder building, a public school cannot. If we were to move a program into that school, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education would say, you are opening a new school in Milton. And to open a new school in Milton, there are things that have to be done. Now, we have the staff, it's current students, it's current curriculum, that's not a problem. But it would have to be ADA compliant, all right? And that building, if you've been in it, is far from ADA compliant. It has basically 4 open spaces for classrooms, which is not enough for our students to begin with. It sits on half an acre lot. We could never, on Blue Hills Parkway, which again, no parking to speak of there, for staff to park at this building. And as I say, we have a lot of staff in that building. And as far as the ADA compliance goes, well, in 1998, the Council on Aging lived in that building, and they came to the Warrant Committee and said, we need to make this more compliant than it is, because the senior citizens in it couldn't get up and down various levels. And the town, this town body appropriated $278,000 in 1998 to make it partially compliant. They then came back in 1999 and said, guess what, $278,000 doesn't make a dent in it, we need $675,000 to make it partially compliant in 1999, all right? At that point, the Warrant Committee, which amazingly enough I sat on at the time, said that doesn't make a lot of sense. We can spend $1.3 million and build a Council on Aging building on a piece of land that we own behind Town Hall, the site of the old Thatcher building, and we did. And that's why the Council on Aging is there in 2001. We have looked at this building. There are innumerable reasons why it doesn't work as a public preschool. I would love to free up some space in the Collicutt School, but this one won't do it. And the carrying costs of making this ADA compliant would be, well, I'm not going to estimate, but they would certainly be, you're talking about 25 years ago, over $750,000. It's got to be 8 times that by now.
Thank you, sir. I think Ms. Rosemarin and then the gentleman here, and I think those may be our last speakers. Did I catch all of you here? I think I did. Yes, Ms. Rosemarin.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ada Rosemarin, Precinct 2 Town Meeting Member. Just another little bit of a trip back to the late 90s when I was a young parent of a 2-, 4-, and 6-year-old, three kids. Had just left a job at the Department of Education working on early childhood programs and knew of a Community Partnership for Children grant program that Milton had never applied for. And I've always wondered why, and came to town and talked to people, and we decided to give it a shot. But in order to apply for the grant, you had to have what's called a lead agency. And for that grant program, you could have a public school, and Milton Public Schools at the time wasn't interested, a Head Start program, there isn't one in Milton, or a private preschool program. And we gathered all of the preschool community together, and everyone sat down except Brian Sheff and Discovery Schoolhouse, who stepped up and was willing to serve as the lead agency. Now this is 27 years later, and Discovery Schoolhouse is still the lead agency for the Milton Early Childhood Alliance. As was mentioned before, has served thousands of Milton children, helped Milton's families with young children, and has helped other Milton early childhood programs with quality support and directors, groups, and many, many things that were already mentioned this evening. But I rise to support this. I believe that Discovery Schoolhouse deserves its own home in this beautiful building and in a center of a very walkable neighborhood, and I encourage you all to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, down in the front, you're recognized.
Andy D'Amato, Precinct 7. I just want to speak a little bit about process.
really speak about the value of the warrant committee. Elected or not, these volunteers work incredible hours, taking deep dives into all these warrants and issues. And to degradate them is unconscionable. Their opinions are, in my opinion, their opinions are as valued as any other board in this town. And I just want to say I appreciate the incredible amount of work you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Agostino, and I think you'll be our last speaker. It's approaching 10:30. If anyone else wishes to speak, please make your way down or we'll wrap up. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, Diane DiTullio, Agostino, Precinct 9. Could we just educate our new members that once they've finished speaking, because I shouldn't have to stand here and discuss my medical issues, but when there are fragrances in the area where we wait, so once people are done speaking in the front rows, you know, those that come up to speak, it's an ADA thing to request that they go back, because this is really bad that I'm having difficulty
That's
breathing.
okay. So for the new members, if you have a follow-up to your question, you're welcome to sit in the front and I'll recognize you for a follow-up. Otherwise, if you're done, if you just return to your seat. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for clarifying that. So I had a few questions that I'm determined to get out, because one will possibly be a friendly or a identified motion. And I looked up on the Assessors Town website. We've heard so many things about, well, a trust. The town assessors website still identifies the owner of the building or the property. It's not just the building, it's also the building and the land, has been the Town of Milton Library. So if we can clarify who actually owns that, because generally the assessor, when a deed is transferred, I don't know if there was a deed transfer. There seems to have been something that went on between the Town of Milton and the Town of Milton Library. Remember, as that was discussed. So if we can first of all get that answer.
Do you have any other questions to tee up?
After that answer, the assessors were here in 800,000 was an appraised value. Did the town, whoever it was who did it, whether it was the library that owned it and got the assessment or the select board,
So who did it? The select board of the library, is that it?
whoever did it, did they get 3 appraisals? Because in the past, for over decades, whenever we got commercial appraisals,
Yep.
you'll recall that we had to get more than 1, for sure. So if there was only 1 appraisal, and the reason I raised this as the second question is because the town assessor's website has the valuation. So if you go to the town assessor's website, you can look up your house, the valuation. Generally, you can sell it for more than what the valuation. It reads 900, I don't want to get the wrong number here, 937,000 on the town's assessor's website. And those 2 questions will help prepare for the either friendly motion or amendment.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Zulis, can you answer the first question on ownership?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
And
Moderator.
appraisals, I think, too, probably, right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the deed, which I have here, deeds the property to be held by, it's to the inhabitants of Milton, to be held by said town in perpetuity in trust. And then it gives the town the opportunity either to use it for library purposes or to sell it. So it's held by the town. It's owned by the town, not the library trustees.
So the assessor's site, and that, there was no change recently. It's been that way.
Okay.
But the assessors just happen to say Town of Milton Library. But I appreciate clarifying the deed specifically. So for a purchase and sale agreement, it will be the Town of Milton on the purchase and sale agreement.
Very good. And number of appraisals, Mr. Zulis?
So 3 appraisals are not required by 30B, and we, recognizing the cost of appraisals, I think we got a good deal on the appraisal. We had Landvest do it, which is a very well-respected appraisal outfit in Milton, and I can't remember the name of the fellow who did it. Do you remember the name of it? Emmett Logue, who also did the appraisal for us up on the property up at St. Agatha's for the fire station when we were doing that. So we had Mr. Logue do the appraisal, and over a period of time we paid, I think we paid $9,000 for the appraisal, but we're not required to get 3 under 30B. And again, the purpose of it was to go to Discovery and say, look, it's really worth more. But then when we went out on the RFP, that was the highest, they were the highest bidder. So.
Thank you, sir. Follow-up, ma'am?
Okay, so my motion has to deal with those answers, and I do want to preface my motion with the comment that this really is one of those articles that you use your heart to vote on. There's no doubt there's a lot of heart in this one. And while we call the board in front of us the warrant committee, they really are our finance committee. And as a financial planner, sometimes you have to tell people, you know, financially, this isn't the right thing. So I respect their opinion. I respect that the moderator goes through a lot of town residents to get a group of people that all don't think alike. So I do want to commend them on taking the time. Sometimes you have to take more time to analyze things. So my concern is, and when I was the sub-chair on the warrant committee for the library, we uncovered a lot of different trust funds. So the following question, proposal, friendly or not, and I'm not sure if it can be made, is we're talking about funds in a purchase sale agreement. The Nathaniel T. Kidder Trust Fund, the Nathaniel T. Kidder Library Trust Fund exists, and it was by Nathaniel, and it's under the control of the treasurer. And for over 10 years, the library trustees weren't even aware, but then they became aware that they could use that. On the green paper, and this is kind of the technical issue, on the green paper, the warrant committee mentions about contributing a sizable amount to the library trust principal. My concern, we're all here that the money would go for library use. And I'd like to see if it's possible as a friendly motion or as a motion to add the sentence, only because there is this Nathaniel Trust Fund, which he specified. I mean, it may not be through the will because it's separate. I don't have his will handy. But it specifically says that the funds, except for the principal, could be used. So in this paper, the $500,000, if it's put into one of the trust funds that requires it to be considered principal, you know, all the lawyers start looking into it. Okay, the town sold it, they have $500,000. The library trustees have a lot of needs. You know, we might have overrides in the future or other needs. So that's a critical question as to which trust fund the $500,000 would go into, if it's going to be considered principal, or if it could be considered by the trustees' use. And that's why I really think that Nathaniel T. Kidder Library Trust Fund is key to a potential deposit, because this article doesn't say where the money's going. You know, in our heart, we all want it to go for the library, however the building's sold. But technically, the article, who knows? The town could have a crisis. We've used a lot of free money, and there's $500,000. So the question, Mr. Moderator, I have is whether it's even allowed within the scope. I mean, it is determining where the money would go, and whether it would be considered a friendly motion, or if I'd have to rise and make a motion, and it would be, the words would be, and I wrote it down for you, and that the proceeds be so after the purchase and sale agreement sentence, there was a comma, and then you would add, and that the proceeds be deposited to either the Nathaniel T. Kidder Trust Fund, Library Trust Fund, or to wherever the select board is considering depositing the money for the library trustees to be able to access it. So there's a few questions within my...
Yeah, if you're going to offer an amendment, we need to have it pretty tight and specific.
Oh, so I should get the answer on if maybe they already have considered which fund they're going to put it in.
I'll tell you what, so we don't keep getting into further and further questions. Do you have any other questions at this point? That's the last one. So that your question is, what's the destination of the funds, and specifically, will it benefit? Is it designated to the library's benefit?
Will it be restricted as a principal that they'd only use the income of, or would it be something that the trustees could use? That all comes in the language of whichever trust fund it would be going into.
Okay, Mr. Zulis, do you think you have the question clear?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The deed, no, this is the decree, sorry. This is the decree. The decree, which was the judicial action on the will to enforce the will which led to the deed. The decree provides that the funds of a sale, if there is a sale, would be the town would invest the proceeds thereof and hold the same in trust. And so it would be, and it's the library trustees. So the obligation of the select board on a sale is to transfer the funds to the library trustees who would invest the proceeds thereof and hold the same in trust. So there's not a specific trust, Ms. Agostino, under the decree. It's the obligation of the library trustees to hold it in trust. They have the power to decide how to hold it in trust, but the obligation under they have the power under the decree to invest it and to hold it in trust. And we have the obligation as a select board to under the deed and the decree and the will to provide those funds to the library trustees. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Do you have a follow-up to that?
So thank you very much.
This is the last one, Ms. Agostino. Okay.
It should be. Thank you very much for reading the decree specifically. So we don't need to do a friendly motion because you read the decree and how the will and everything goes. So the funds would be transferred, but you don't know specifically to which trust of the library was the question I originally had asked.
So the answer is under the decree, the trustees have the power to decide how to hold those funds in trust.
Okay.
There's no specific trust and so for us to try to designate a specific trust would be in violation of the decree.
Got it. So it's up to the library trustees, once they receive the assets of the proceeds of the sale, to determine how they're going to hold them. So I would think that the next question would be the library trustees do not plan on just, they can do anything with it. They don't have to hold the principal and only use the income, which I think Mr. Zulis must understand why I'm asking this question.
Ma'am, our rules do not allow this
I understand
question.
that completely. I'm just
Then-
following what I've seen tonight.
Then,
Thank you.
ma'am, okay. I think we understand your questions. I think we got the audience got the essence of the point. So, thank you for your contribution. No, ma'am.
We don't have the answer to the original question.
Which
Principal, what's on the green paper? Principal, if you only take the proceeds. So since the town, he only gave me the answer to the decree, they would transfer the money to the library trustees.
Yes.
So it's the library trustees' belief that they're not going to just put this in a fund and call it the principal and they can only spend the income. That's the outstanding question, that they will accept the $500,000 to use however they want. I guess that's the question because he read the decree answer that the library trustees are saying that yes, they would accept the money and use it however they need to use it and would not limit it to just the income.
So you'd like a statement from the library trustees about their intent for the funds? Ms. Hodlin, do you think you can answer that question as the chair of the library trustees? I can't hear, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Hodlin, I thought you were the chair. I apologize. So,
Good evening, everyone. Paul Hayes, member of Precinct 4. I'm not an elected member of town meeting. I'm the elected member of the Board of Trustees of the library, serving as chair. In good faith, our answer is that all the funds that will come from the sale of the Kidder building will be voted on by the trustees to serve in the capacity of the library in the scope of the current strategic plan as overseen by the trustees and the director of the library. So every cent will go to the library, either in programming or in capital, to support the library. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Agostino.
Mr. Moderator, thank you for getting the answers to
Please, ladies and gentlemen. Please, ladies and gentlemen.
Excuse me, I am thanking the moderator for getting the answers to the questions that I began with.
Thank you. Thank you. Just hand the mic perhaps to Mr. O'Brien. You're recognized, sir. And then Ms. Grinslow, I think you're... No. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just a question for Mr. Azulis, just to clarify. Greater Boston, as you know, is one of the hottest...
Could you just introduce yourself, sir?
Robert O'Brien, Precinct 8, sorry. Greater Boston is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country, right? And your appraiser that you mentioned earlier sounds like a fantastic appraiser and sounds like they were spot on with that valuation. Can you educate me in terms of the RFP process? Is it relegated basically to those that would go to the Town of Milton website or those that sign up for an email blast? How does that work? And was there any attempt to engage commercial real estate brokers, people who eat and breathe this every day and make deals happen at market prices? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Mr. Zulis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the requirement is to post it on the Central Register, publish it in the Milton Times. We did not engage, to my knowledge, we did not engage a broker. We did not hire a broker to do this, no. We received responses to their RFP, and again, it was done on 3 occasions, 1 by the trustees and 2 by us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
And lastly, ma'am, you're recognized.
Hyacinth Critchlow, Precinct 4, Library Trustee. No good deeds go unpunished. And I have to say this because I'm the last standing trustee who rented the Discover Schoolhouse to Mr. Brian Sheft and his staff. When Mr. Sheft had a school before, I think the property was owned by the Archdiocese, and he needed a place for his school. There was nowhere else. We had the library on board, and no one would rent the building. The building was just empty. And so he came to us and asked, could we rent him the building? And we did. Mr. Sheff has been very good and a very devoted landlord for the trustees of the library. I'm very sorry that it comes to this, that we have to be here debating on whether or not we should sell him the building or the building should go back to the town. At this point, however, I'm going to ask you, please, to vote yes on this article. It's as if it's like a burden on us, and me personally, because I'm the last standing trustee, and I was the one who, I could say, rent him the building. And so month after month, year after year, just to hear all the different things and repairs to be done, nothing can be done, and the back and forth. Finally, I'm sitting there and said, a weight has been taken off my shoulders. None of the other trustees who was around at the time when the building was rented is still on the board. I'm the last man standing, or woman to say, standing right now. And so therefore, I ask, please, could you give a yes vote? And so relieve us of this that we're going through tonight, that we don't have to come back again to this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, we'll proceed to the vote. So if we could put the voting software up. Just confirm with Town Council, this is a majority vote, correct? No? It's 2/3? Okay, I don't think I got that in the note, all right? I'm sorry, what's it? I'll re-explain. Let me go back to the rules, because that helped whenever this comes up. If everyone's ready, in the event that the Warrant Committee recommends a no vote on an article, the question will be presented as a vote on a motion made and seconded to approve the article. So the members vote yes if they favor the article and no if they oppose the article, as recommended by the Warrant Committee. So if you are in favor of the sale, you press 1 for yes. If you oppose the sale, you press 2 for no, and it's 3 for abstain. All good? We get this every time? You should ask. It's a good question. All right. If we could open, is 2/3 vote? 2/3 vote? If we could open the poll. All in favor, please press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 for abstain. I haven't declared the vote. I declare a 2/3 vote by a vote of 213 yeses and 22 noes and 1 abstain. Just a reminder, we're going to pick up Article 31 and 32 at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. May I have a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. See you Thursday.